What I would hope that people would learn from their experience here of the Apostle Islands is foremost is that, for the Anishinaabe people, this whole area was sacred to them.
This was our homeland. This is where we were supposed to be. This is what our spiritual people and our medicine people and the Creator had for us to be in this area, to be able to, depend and live off the water.
In the Anishinaabe tradition, it is said a long, long time ago that the Anishinaabe people were not walking in balance. And so there were 7 teachings that were given to a young boy who eventually grew to be an old man. And this individual brought the teachings to the Anishinaabe on how they should live. These teachings are so important for us to follow and listen to, and to practice each one of these teachings as they apply to the Apostle Islands.
We talk about those 7 grandfathers, using those 7 grandfathers as we use our voice to preserve and protect. It's a way of life for us. And those are the teachings that we can give to our children today.
So it's not protection for me, it's protection for 7 generations ahead. I'm amazed at our ancestors and what they protected for us in these areas and what treaties have been signed to protect for generations to come.
So collectively, together, if we can respect and if we can honor what we have for future generations, then we know it will continue and it will be maintained. The National Park Service, they're preserving the National Lakeshore. That's a very important part.
It's a really amazing opportunity, I think, for the Park Service and a responsibility to care not only for everything that's here, but to really help the people around these places be a part of that as well, so that everyone realizes we can't do it alone. Our responsibility is always thinking about 7 generations and beyond, and what it means to respect and care for a place, and how to do it together.
We think in terms of the 7th generation. And by thinking of the 7th generation, we're thinking for the future of the Apostle Islands, what do we want it to look like? And so when visitors come to the Apostle Islands, I'd like them to experience that beauty and think about the Apostle Islands in the future. How important it is to maintain what we have. This was a gift. I can remember walking the shoreline on Stockton Island, and I could feel this unconditional love for all creation, for the water, for the beauty. When people come here to visit the park, I think it's really important to know that it has a rich cultural history here in this area, and that for centuries, the Anishinaabe, as well as other tribal groups, have lived in this area, and they hunted, and they fished here, and they gathered here. I think about what the Creator gave us and provided for us by creating these particular islands. They're a part of my soul. They are a part of my spirit.
Here we are up in northern Wisconsin, Apostle Islands, and we have all these little connections to the land and the spiritual connection to the land itself. We have areas that are sacred to us that you can literally feel the aura in your body on this particular piece of land. Whether you're Anishinaabe or not, these areas can have that feeling to everybody.
I love going out of the area and coming upon Anishinaabe, because we all know each other. I feel everybody needs to know who they are and where they come from.
So the legend tells us that in the Ojibwe migration, the great Anishinaabe nation, known as the Ojibwe people, lived on the eastern seaboard just off the St. Lawrence Seaway. And the teaching is that the migration itself took over 500 years to reach Moniwanikani, Madeline Island. And when they got here, that's when the mega shell appeared over Madeline Island. Prophet said, you'll know your home when you find the food that grows on water. And all the signs were in place where they found the monomen, the wild rice that grows on water. The migration was a spiritual journey for the Anishinaabe. The prophets encouraged the Anishinaabe to go on a great migration. And they would find not only Minaadendamowin, the good life, but also they would find their long lost home.
For me personally, growing up here, I have that deep love and deep connection to the lands and the waters. Coming from a commercial fishing family, so as a youngster, I was able to actually stay here on Manitou Island and have that connection to this island itself as a commercial fisherman's son. As a commercial fisherman in the 70s, we were able to come out here and spend time on the island here and have that connection to history and create new history for us and tell those stories that were of this area, which is unique. So this is one of the few places that I do come at least a couple of times a year and visit and retell my stories that I remember from my father. Coming here to Manitou is just unique, it's special, and I really appreciate that it's still here and I can tell those stories that I was told. I wish I would have paid more attention and listened to more of the stories and remembered more of them. So when you go to a different area, there's stories there. There's things to be told about it.
I feel most connected to this area all the time. Every time I get up and I come outside, or when I'm walking and I see people, our community members, I feel connected when we walk by the water, spiritually, physically, emotionally, mentally connected. That's how I think about it.
We have that connection with Mother Earth and the surrounding waters because in today's terms, that's our gardens, that's our grocery stores. That's where we go to get our food that we traditionally have used for 7 generations and beyond. And now in the new generations, we're trying to carry that forth and reteach the younger generation into that concept of what was and what could be.
I think one of the really important pieces when visitors come here to recognize the beauty of the Apostle Islands, and then to also recognize the fact that the Anishinaabe people lived here and other tribal groups lived here for thousands of years. If I had a teacher elder, I asked her, what would you do if you didn't have the big lake around you? And what her response was I would shrivel up and I would blow away in the wind. She didn't feel like she would exist. That teacher happened to be my mother. Every day she would walk the shoreline up till 90 years old, and she would get a chance to observe what we have. And to her, that was love. And if she didn't have it, she would just fly away. And that's the way I feel about this area. That it's very important for us to protect what we have. It's love that's unconditional. I guess to me that is the real bliss of the Apostle Islands.
From what I understand, science is just now catching up to things that we know already. They might learn something, whether it's to sit back and to listen harder, or to go into a meeting and listen to our elders talk about some of the things that are taking place right now. They'll learn something.
I think wisdom and intelligence are commonly confused, and it's an important distinction. You can have a great deal of intelligence, which can mean factual knowledge and data, but that's very different from wisdom, which in many ways is how you apply and learn from knowledge. We have plenty of examples of short-term thinking that did incredible damage to the environment, and we still deal with the consequences of that. We know the tribes were still practicing fire out there as late as the 1920s, 30s, 40s. Land management at that time was really anti-fire, and that doubtlessly had a lot to do with the end of traditional use of fire that we see on Stockton. There's an established fire history there, and you can see the effects of fire exclusion now. We're getting a lot of small understory species in an area that probably used to be very open pine.
We used to go out amongst the islands and pick blueberries. My father took us out there, and he'd tell me the stories of using fire as a tool to enhance the growth of a certain species, mostly blueberries, but also other species. It put new nutrients down into the soils. It took out some of the underbrush. It took out some of the older plants. So a new generation comes through, and it worked really well.
What frequent fire return interval will do, low intensity, fast moving ground fires will help keep the understory under those red pine free of other tree species like the balsams and birch and things like that, and it'll make it basically better environment for blueberry and huckleberry.
Back in the day when my dad used to do it, they pretty much knew the only people that were out there, and they knew everybody was gone, and then they would light it up and burn one of the islands or part of the islands, or go around and burn sections of different islands. In our way, fire is a tool that's to be used, but you have to have respect for the area that you're going to use that on. If you do make a mistake, you jeopardize a lot. So there was a lot of planning or a lot of education that went into any time a burn was to occur. They knew the fire would burn this area to the waterfront, and that's as far as it go because the conditions were favorable for that to occur.
As a cultural resource manager, I see the value in not only maintaining those traditions, but also helping to maintain representative sets of cultural landscapes, where landscapes show long-term human practices and effects on the land.
When it comes to the Stockton fires, I did visit it after the fact, and it was really good to see that back on the landscape and be able to tell some of our elders that, hey, it happened again. Maybe not to the magnitude that was once upon a time, but it did happen again. So that tool was being used out there to enhance, just like they were told or they participated in the past. So we were thinking 7 generations behind, 7 generations ahead. People of today's generation got to think, what are we doing today that's going to directly affect 7 generations from now? One drop in a bucket doesn't mean nothing. But over 7 generations, the bucket's going to overflow and some negativity may occur from that.
Looking ahead and looking back, things have changed. We're part of the changes taking place. With the next 7 generations ahead, I worry about that because they're never going to get that enjoyment that we had because it's going to be so changed. Creator gifted us this amazing life, but he gave us responsibilities with it also. The most important one is to be able to take care of the natural gifts that he gave us.
The first time I went on Lake Superior, I was intimidated. You don't have to go very far from shore before you realize what a big body of water you're on. So it's 377 miles from one end to the other. That's like driving from New York to Boston. The open area of open water, that's called a fetch. And the wind can whip up waves. The islands and the structures under the water, mainly the different depths and channels under the water, can concentrate the waves, funnel them so that they can be significantly higher in certain areas.
We're talking about Lake Superior Gichigami. I am a water walker, and I do walk and I pray for the water. The water is a female spirit. People need to be aware that she's there and she takes care of us. She can turn. If we don't respect her, she can take life.
The earliest archaeological evidence we have in the islands dates to about 5,000 years ago. We have evidence of what are probably very early Native American fish camps. A lot of that was probably spearing. That was a Lake Superior fishing tradition that carried right on up into the 1900s.
I've been going with my dad since I was 7 years old, because my dad was a commercial fisherman. My grandpa was a commercial fisherman. My two uncles were commercial fishermen. The best time for a fisherman is when he gets off the lake, he can't wait to get back on it. It can be awful, awful mean. A few times, I almost didn't make it back home. The big lake, Gichigami. One morning you can go on to the lake, and by the afternoon you run into rough seas. I can remember as a young man, as a young commercial fisherman, helping my uncles. We went out into the lake in a fishing vessel, and it was probably late fall. And when we left Bayfield, the lake was really super calm. And when we arrived out by Raspberry Island, the waves were so huge that we couldn't see from island to island. And I could barely stand straight. And when we got to Bayfield, the water was calm. And do you know, I was sick for 3 days after that. And I think probably that was one of the turning points in my life. And I understood clearly how the lake could change very easily. You need to be aware of all of this, just like the ancestors did. And you need to make sure you're well equipped. My uncles, lived a lifetime on this lake fishing, and it was considered to be their home. And I'm sure that their spirit still travels this lake. Well, respect is something that has to come from deep within. So how I show respect, number one, is I often carry tobacco with me to offer that tobacco to Gichigami, the big lake, to honor the area. Lake Superior is the second fastest warming lake on the planet, warming twice as fast as the atmosphere. We're losing ice cover, and that changes the ecosystem entirely. In the shoals, lake trout spawn, and when the ice covers those shoals through the winter, it protects those eggs that hatch in the spring. Without the ice cover, those relationships might be damaged. As it warms, invasive species can easier get a foothold and change everything we know and love about our lake and the way it should be. We say in our tradition, the lake was passed down to cherish our Great Spirit. He's the one that had the vision for Gichigami, the big lake, what it would look like. And so the best we can do is to maintain it for that purpose and to make sure it's always here. I know that as Anishinaabe, that if we don't respect, that's when we create unbalance. That's not a way to live, and that's what we destroy.
So water to me water is life, water is healing, water is love. It is our responsibility to always keep our water pristine and pure. And that's why you see Indigenous people standing up and always talking and always protecting the water, protecting the land. We wouldn't be here if it wasn't for water.
The Gaylor Nelson Wilderness is a wilderness area that includes 80% of the park. And it was established to basically create an extra layer of protection for the park. The islands are challenging for plants and animals to get to and move between. But once they're there, if the habitat is really conducive to them, the number of threats is lower. So the park acts as a refuge for many things.
The definition is, of course, from 1964, and it really defines wilderness as a place where a man is not remaining, but only a visitor, and that the evidence of man is not clearly seen. And I think that is problematic if we stop to think about it, because the evidence of humans in wilderness is everywhere. And it is in every footstep and every lifeway of Indigenous people.
If you look at some of the early writings of our famous chiefs, Indigenous nations across North America, they all recognize the fact that the earth was our mother and that, we are now only a vein of the earth, of the plants and the animals.
Indinawemaaganidog, all my relatives are all my relations. And it's not just us as humans, but it's that relationship that we have with our animal brothers and sisters. It's a relationship that we have with the land, with the water, that all of that coming together is something that we've been able to somehow maintain, even though we've lost a lot of things. My Indian or spirit name is Gayash or Seal. Sometimes I'll sit back by a beach and I'll just watch them. and realize like they have their own culture, they have their own way of doing things. So in our teachings, that connection that we have with those elements that are around us, with our animal brothers and sisters, being able to watch and observe them and the way that they live, they can also help teach us the way that we should live. You know, they've existed maybe for like millions and millions of years, you know, and yet with all of this crazy stuff that we have in our world right now, they've been able to survive. And it might be just something simple and basic of watching the birds out there, picking at the ground for something, looking at the ground and watching the ants. It's just amazing, and we can learn so much from that.
I think the key to humility is listening and believing that those you are encountering have something very important to share with you. So whether it's a child or an elder or a visitor or a community member or even just the natural environment, to take time to listen and understand that you have the opportunity to learn that day.
So as the islands is wilderness, I would call them more of a preserve. We do have activities that occurred on those islands, from homesteads to farming to logging, and we have our traditional use amongst the islands themselves. But they are preserved. We are trying to preserve the natural beauty that's there, but yet leave the openness of our traditional usage still amongst the islands to be available. You know, everything has its niche. Everything has its way of living and why it's here. We have to respect that, and we have to acknowledge that fact.
One thing for us not to forget is that wilderness spaces, in fact, did have humans inhabiting them for thousands of years. And so to erase that is really damaging history, damaging science, damaging understanding of these places and how to keep them healthy. So inhabited spaces are, in fact, a very clear fact about wilderness and a good thing for us to remember. The park has been designated by Congress to care for and steward the park. Part of the role of the employees in the park is to, again, learn from the community, learn from the Anishinaabe people. We are in ceded territory and treaty territory, and our responsibility is to listen and be the caretakers with the wisdom that we gain from others.
I just can't express enough the value what our traditional way gives us and provides us, especially during this day and age. So the Anishinaabe was given the knowledge to know that all creation has spirit. In our teachings, we say we are not above creation, but we are a part of creation, and that what we do to them, we do to ourselves.